This is Land of Havilah, Exodus 21. Deuteronomy chapter 5 gives more detail about the day God delivered the 10 Commandments. It was terrifying. It was so beyond what they could endure that the elders of Israel approached Moses and begged him to beg Yahweh to please stop. They thought they were about to die as Yahweh was speaking. They said to Moses, "You go near and listen to whatever he says, and we'll do whatever he says, but if we keep hearing his voice ourselves, we'll die." God responded very positively to that. He told Moses they've spoken well. God told Moses he should dismiss the congregation, tell them to go back to camp, to their tents. Then Moses approached the thick darkness alone to keep listening, and Yahweh kept delivering law. With so much law coming now, we should explain a few things. The law will fill much of the rest of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, with a lot of vital history mixed in. Yahweh didn't force the law on Israel. He told them basically, if you want me, the law comes with me, and they said yes. After Yahweh delivers the law to them, they'll agree to it again. Therefore, the whole of the law applied only to ancient Israel, but some of it is timeless, the part we might call the moral law. For example, you shall not steal is timeless, and you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, and many others. The New Testament confirms that the moral law still applies. But we're not saved by keeping the law. We're saved by grace, and we keep the moral law because it's right. It's what everyone knows should be done, Romans 2:15, and it's what Christians do because the Spirit of God rules us, Hebrews 10:16. God's written the law on our hearts, Hebrews 10:16. Without God, a man's conscience becomes seared. He becomes hardened to what should be done. God uses the law of Moses as a tool to reawaken our conscience, to sharpen our understanding of morality. It makes us aware of moral principles that we should know, but perhaps we've forgotten. The Old and New Testaments call it the law of Moses, but let's not be confused. Yahweh originated the law, not Moses. It's the law of Yahweh. Moses only wrote it down the way Yahweh gave it to him. As we read the coming law, your narrator intends only to clarify the meaning without adding or taking away. He'll leave the law uncut, like the uncut stones of an altar, without lifting a tool to take a single chip out of any of them. Verse 1. Now these are the ordinances which you shall set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go free without paying anything. Comment, if an Israelite purchases a fellow Israelite as a servant, he should hold him in service no more than 7 years. He should release him sometime during the 7th year. The master shouldn't charge the servant any type of fee for release. Verse 3. If he comes in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he's married, then his wife shall go out with him. Comment, if the servant is married when he comes in, he may take his wife with him when he goes out. Verse 4. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. Comment, if the master gives the servant a wife, and the wife bears children, then when the servant leaves, the servant doesn't have the right to take his wife and children with him. It follows that if the wife and children are Hebrews, they'll be due at some point for release themselves, so they could join their husband and father. If the husband and father accepts release from the master, there's nothing here saying he must go very far and abandon the family, or that he has to go anywhere. Perhaps, for example, his master will be willing to hire him for a wage and he can keep living with his wife and children. Also, he may stay under the following arrangement, verse 5. But if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to God, and shall bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. Comment, the Hebrew servant has the right to remain a servant if he wishes. Therefore, he's never forced to leave wife and children, or forced to leave a master he loves, but he must commit to lifelong service. This is applicable to Christ and us. We love our Master Christ. We don't want to leave him. We ask to remain his servant for our lifetime, and he puts his mark on us. Verse 7. If a man sells his daughter to be a female servant, she shall not go out as the male servants do. Comment, a Hebrew female servant is a different case. Verse 8. If she doesn't please her master who has married her to himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he's dealt deceitfully with her. Comment, if someone purchases a Hebrew female servant from her father and takes her as wife, honesty calls for him to keep her forever. But if he wishes to be deceitful and put her away, he can sell her, but not to a foreigner. This constitutes a divorce. God hates divorce, Malachi 2:16, but he made allowance for it in Mosaic law because he knew people were hard-hearted, Mark 10:5. There were going to be divorces no matter what Yahweh said, so Yahweh delivered some law to cover the situation. His law on divorce didn't indicate he approved of divorce. It only provided a way of handling the inevitable. This applies to the law in general, that there would be situations in addition to divorce that weren't ideal, therefore there had to be laws for handling them. So the existence of Mosaic laws governing servitude, for example, weren't a statement by Yahweh that servitude is an ideal situation. The laws on the subject were just a way of handling the inevitable. If someone ran into hard times, the giving of himself into servitude could be the only way of surviving. Therefore, better to have laws governing servitude than to ignore the existence of it and allow servants to be abused. To illustrate that the law of Moses wasn't ideal in every sense, we could point to the case of Joseph in the New Testament. When Mary turned up pregnant, Joseph had the right under Mosaic law to demand Mary be stoned, but his righteousness on the subject exceeded the law of Moses. Rather than making her a public example, he wanted to put her away secretly and not embarrass her. And for that, Matthew 1:19 calls him righteous. So, though the law of Moses came straight from Yahweh, it was still less than ideal because the men ruled by the law would create for themselves situations that never should have existed. For another example, the law of Moses said, "You shall not commit adultery." But Jesus pointed out that the law didn't go far enough on that. It should have said, "You shall not even look on a man or woman with lust," Matthew 5:28. He also said the law didn't go far enough on murder, that to be perfect, the law should also prohibit the root of murder, which was anger, Matthew 5:22. So we have multiple confirmations that the law didn't reflect God's heart, owing to the imperfections of men that it ruled. When we see something in the law that we don't like, it might be that Yahweh never liked it either. Now, in our day, we're hard of heart in other ways. We tolerate a lot more adultery, for example, than was ever tolerated in the day of Moses. Israelites were able to keep precise genealogies and organize their economy around inheritance because it was much rarer at the time for someone not to know who their father was. So each generation has its own moral shortcomings. If anyone wants to cast stones at the culture of ancient Israel, he should realize that if ancient Israelites knew what was coming in our culture, they would find more than enough ammunition to fire back at us. Still speaking of a purchased Hebrew servant woman, verse 9, "If he marries her to his son, he shall deal with her as a daughter. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, and her marital rights. If he doesn't do these things for her, she may go free without paying any money." Comment, a Hebrew female servant has protections under the law. She's not to be treated as a prostitute. Verse 12, "One who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death." Comment, the penalty for intentional murder is death. Verse 13, "But not if it is unintentional, but God allows it to happen, then I will appoint you a place where he shall flee." Comment, at times a man might die accidentally by the hand of another man. If it was accidental, the man who caused it can flee to a designated sanctuary. He can stay there to be safe from avengers. More about that coming later. If there is an intentional murder or attempted murder, verse 14, "If a man schemes and comes presumptuously on his neighbor to kill him, you shall take him from my altar that he may die." Comment, a premeditated murder or attempted murder calls for the death penalty. There shall be no sanctuary for the murderer, even if he runs to an altar and clings to it. Verse 15, "Anyone who attacks his father or mother shall surely be put to death." Comment, the penalty for attacking one's father or mother is death. Ordinarily, the penalty for injuring someone is that the same injury should be inflicted on the perpetrator, coming shortly. But for attacking a parent, it's death. So it's much more grievous to attack one's parent. Verse 16, Anyone who kidnaps someone and sells him, or if he's found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. Comment, death for kidnapping, verse 17. Anyone who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. Comment, death for cursing one's father or mother. In modern Western law, there's no penalty at all for cursing a father or mother, but in the eyes of God, it's a serious matter. This points up the fact that there's a big difference in satisfying the laws of the state versus satisfying the laws of God. The law of God, which applies in the court of heaven, is different from the law which applies in the courts of man. Verse 18. If men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he doesn't die but is confined to the bed, if he rises again and walks around with his staff, then he who struck him shall be cleared, only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall provide for his healing until he's thoroughly healed. Comment, if there's a quarrel resulting in an incapacitating injury, the one who caused the injury shall pay all the loss. Verse 20. If a man strikes his servant or his maid with a rod, and he dies under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he gets up after a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he's his property. Comment, there's no punishment for striking a servant as long as the servant rises within 2 days. A servant is property. But the master won't be doing much striking because of what's coming in verses 26 and 27 below, which is that the master must let the servant go free if he causes the loss of an eye or a tooth, and there will be a penalty for killing a servant. Verse 22. If men fight and hurt a pregnant woman so that she gives birth prematurely, and yet no harm follows, he shall surely be fined as much as the woman's husband demands and the judges allow. But if any harm follows, then you must take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, and bruise for bruise. Comment, if there's a fight between 2 men and a pregnant woman's injured in the process so that she delivers early, but the baby's okay, there's a financial penalty limited only by what the judge will allow. If someone dies, such as the unborn baby, mother, or opponent, the penalty is death. If there are injuries, it'll be eye for eye. Jesus commented specifically on this law, quote, "You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't resist him who's evil, but whoever strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also." End quote. In other words, don't fight back. Jesus followed through on that statement by not resisting on the day of his beating and crucifixion. This will have the effect, if someone follows this principle, that since we won't be fighting back, we'll avoid pointless conflict up front. Verse 24. If a man strikes his servant's eye or his maid's eye and destroys it, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. If he strikes out his male servant's tooth or his female servant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. If a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull shall surely be stoned, and its meat shall not be eaten, but the owner of the bull shall not be held responsible. But if the bull has a habit of goring in the past, and it's been testified to its owner, and he's not kept it in, but it's killed a man or a woman, the bull shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. If a ransom is laid on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is laid on him. Whether it is gored a son or is gored a daughter, according to this judgment it shall be done to him. If the bull gores a male servant or a female servant, 30 shekels of silver shall be given to their master, and the ox shall be stoned. Comment, if a bull kills a person, stone the bull. Is the owner liable for the person's death? If the bull has no history of goring, no. If the bull had a history of goring and the owner let it get loose, yes. The guilty owner shall either die or pay ransom to save his life. If the victim is a servant, the fine will be 30 shekels of silver. Verse 33. If a man opens a pit, or if a man digs a pit and doesn't cover it, and a bull or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make it good. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead animal shall be his. Comment, if a man digs a pit, he's responsible for any of his neighbor's animals that might fall into it. He shall make it good. Coming up, back to bulls and the damage they might do to other animals. Verse 35. If one man's bull injures another's so that it dies, then they shall sell the live bull and divide its price, and they shall also divide the dead animal. Or if it is known that the bull was in the habit of goring in the past, and its owner has not kept it in, he shall surely pay bull for bull, and the dead animal shall be his own. Comment, it'll pay the owner to keep his bulls well confined. That's the chapter. More Pure Law coming next time at landofhavilah.net for Exodus 22. Exodus 22.